I was saying the rosary at 8:30 in the morning with Father Kevin and his sister-in-law, a group of us, and we were sitting saying the rosary, and this Croatian man started screaming, "Look!" And what we saw was the sun coming at us, and it spinning like a wheel, and then we saw the crucifix disappear. Now, I wasn't looking for it.
I suppose it brought me face to face. I remember thinking, I'm standing in the presence of God, and I suddenly realised at one stage that there were tears pouring down my face.
I felt totally convinced right from the beginning. I absolutely knew that Our Lady was appearing to those children.
No audible voice. It was simply as though someone had spoken to me, and the message that they had given me was there. And I knew it was from Mary.
They see Our Lady, this is their story, and she speaks to them.
For over 7 years, the remote Yugoslav village of Medjugorje has been a focus of world interest. Several million have gone there from the 5 continents. The pious faithful, non-believers, Catholics, Muslims, Lutherans, people of all faiths and none, priests, bishops and even theologians. Journalists, radio and television reporters have also found it a fruitful source of copy and headline. Scientists of impeccable credentials have worked there with the most modern equipment. Why? The answer is in the unfailing testimony of 6 young people, 2 boys and 4 girls, now in their early 20s. They assert that they see the Blessed Virgin Mary every evening, that she conveys messages to them of universal importance, that she has confided to them secrets which will have great significance in the life of the Catholic Church. Apparitions of Our Lady have, of course, happened before, and in well-known cases have met with official church approval. Lourdes, Fatima and Knock are well-known examples. Apparitions in hundreds have been reported since the early decades of the present century, and are, even at the present time, spoken of in very many parts of the world. But Medjugorje is different. It's distinctive not only in its impact worldwide and the millions of pilgrims it's attracted, but especially so in the effect on the village itself. Its inhabitants are Croatians, traditionally Catholic, dynamic, reckless of danger, but occasionally sharply divided. Here now, since the start of the apparitions, has come total unity, despite long-standing local quarrels. Here, above all, is a unique community bound together by a special religious fervour, a whole village at Mass every evening of the year, and this now for many years. The amount of literature of all kinds, books, pamphlets and newsletters, the many audio and videotapes that have been and are being produced almost every week, is testimony in itself to the extraordinary interest shown by a largely material world in this basically spiritual happening. Medjugorje has also been studied year after year by a man who has an unrivaled reputation as an authority on the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Father René Laurentin, who we'll meet later, has gone to Medjugorje 18 times, has published 11 books on the subject, and was on the scientific commission set up in 1985 to report to the Vatican on the apparitions. How and what will the Church decide? What is the Catholic Church's official attitude to these events, if any? Suffice to say that the local bishop, enmeshed in conflict with the Franciscans who look after the parish, was at first favourable, indeed enthusiastic, but has now turned very much against the apparitions and has even been heard to refer to them as the work of the devil. His own inquiry into the Medjugorje affair was dissolved by the Vatican. A new inquiry on a broader basis has been initiated. The results are eagerly awaited. Countless cases of religious conversion are known in the Medjugorje story, some of them truly sensational. Very many cases of physical healing have been reported too, some now receiving the professional assessment they call for. There are centres for spreading this message in over 50 countries, and there is an increasing global fraternity seeming to draw light, strength and close unity from this truly amazing phenomenon. To find out why they come and what they're hoping for, and whether their hopes are in any way fulfilled, we spoke to several people who have had personal experience of the miracles and the message of Medjugorje. But first I spoke to Vitska, one of the visionaries inside her own small and rather ill-lit house in the village. I asked her what kind of film she thought the Blessed Virgin would like me to make. Her answer, given through an interpreter, was rather startling.
She said that her and those children are going to pray for you to make that film. And she also said, you have to pray for it, and Our Lady is going to show you.
So there was the challenge. Here now is the film we made. And we started by talking to three people who have each in their different ways had their lives profoundly affected by the miracles and the message of Medjugorje. First of all, I asked Heather Parsons to tell us a little bit about herself.
Well, I've been a journalist for 19, almost 20 years. I've been a reporter, a features writer, an editor, and at the moment I'm editor of the RTE Guide.
Sounds like a busy enough life.
Keeps me going.
And next to you we have Father Michael. Father Michael, tell us about yourself.
Well, I've an interest, permanent interest over a long period in study on Marian theology and Marian devotion. I've written a fair amount about it.
And would one say that Medjugorje is now one of the points of great interest in your life?
Well, it's a point of very considerable interest, unquestionably, Paddy, because it brings to life very much of what we have been studying as past history.
So what was theory is possibly becoming practice?
It's, to some extent, it's like that. It's reality, it's existential, as we would say nowadays.
And on Father Michael's right, we have Wayne Weibel from America. Wayne, just tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I also am a journalist from South Carolina in America. I am formerly the owner of 4 weekly newspapers, publisher, and a columnist, and became involved in Medjugorje by writing a series of articles. And I'm very Protestant, by the way, which makes it a somewhat different angle, that I've become involved in a Marian apparition, something I knew nothing about prior to Medjugorje, and was simply looking for a story. That's how I became involved.
Heather, I believe you're not a Catholic either.
No, I'm
What
not.
sort of religion do you have, if any?
I was brought up as a member of the Church of Ireland and from a very strong Christian Church of Ireland background. And in fact, my first contact with Medjugorje was when I went out to report on it for a national newspaper. And as you said, I had a very strange experience there 2 hours after I arrived. And
Really?
that too
Why
changed
did
my
you
life.
go out in the first place? I mean, why did the paper send you?
I went, in fact, it was my idea. I went because as a journalist of 17 years at that stage, I saw that there was a story there. I believed there was a story there, and obviously, like other journalists, I saw headlines, and I wanted to go out. I'd read a little bit about it, but I wanted to go out and investigate it for myself.
So did the story you came back with differ rather a lot from the one you thought you were going out to get?
It did, because when I came back, I found I was forced to write a personal account of what had happened to me there, besides giving a rundown on the events that were going on in Medjugorje. But it was basically my personal story, whereas I went out feeling I'm going out to do a report, I'm going to interview the people who were involved in this. It just turned out to be something very different.
Fine, we'll come back to your experience in a minute. Father Michael, you were probably much more involved in the Marian side of it than anybody else here.
Yes, I suppose I should state first of all, in this present company, which I'm very happy to have with me, that I'm a Roman Catholic.
Well, it's nice to have one of you around, I suppose. One of the points that's often raised, and I think now that we have the chance with 2 non-Catholics with us, is that the Blessed Virgin Mary and ecumenism don't tend to go too well together, that the Protestant churches have never taken to Our Lady or indeed sometimes the Pope. What's your feeling about this in relation to Medjugorje?
Well, the extraordinary thing is Medjugorje is the breakthrough. The big change has come. And I should think that not only Heather and Wayne are the only people outside the Roman Catholic communion who've been to Medjugorje and who have profited spiritually by going there and are equally enthusiastic about it.
So what are you doing right now as far as Medjugorje is concerned?
Well, I've become somewhat known, I guess, because of the articles that I wrote, and I'm traveling basically throughout America, lecturing on Medjugorje, and of course now internationally as well. This is my 2nd tour of Ireland, and going to be going to Trinidad and to the West Indies and up into the Philippines later next year and a few other spots such as that.
Gay Russell adds a further international dimension to the Medjugorje story as she talks to us from her farm in Malawi in Central Africa.
Good afternoon. My name is Gay Russell, and I'm sitting in the garden of my home here in Malawi, in Central Africa. You asked me to record this, and I found it very difficult to accept doing it, but I finally decided that I would like to do it as a gift to Our Lady. It is her birthday today, so it's Thursday the 8th of September. And I have a very dear friend here who's kindly come to help me and who's going to ask me the 3 questions that you sent to me.
Wayne, you're a hard-bitten journalist, as they're usually described. I'd love to hear your experiences about Medjugorje.
It began really in my own Lutheran church during the Sunday school class, talking about modern-day miracles. And as a newspaper journalist, I'm always looking for a column idea. So at the end of this particular class, or very near the end of it, this one young lady in the class said, well, have you heard of what's happening in this little village called Medjugorje? It's in the middle of Yugoslavia, and according to what I've been told, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ, is appearing to 6 peasant children there. Well, I immediately swung my attention around, and there was not a thing spiritual about it. I simply zeroed in, as any good journalist would, and said that would possibly be a good story. So as soon as the class was over, I said, where did you hear about this? And she said, well, I have a Catholic friend who told me about it. And in my own ignorance, I said, what has Catholic got to do with it? I had no connection, because I had never given 2 thoughts to the Catholic Church, pro or con. I had never really thought about Mary, other than at Christmas time, the very fact that she was the mother of Jesus Christ and was mentioned in the Nativity. That was the extent, and that is the basic extent of the teaching within my Lutheran church. So I got a hold of this book, and I got a hold of the videotape. It was a thin little book. It was easy to read, somewhat primitively written. I read it. I was impressed. This had been going on for 4.5 years, and I did see a real good story. Well, a couple of evenings later, I put my 2 small children to bed, and my wife and I sat down to watch this videotape. And to this day, I have a very hard time explaining what took place in the next few minutes. But as this tape began to roll, it was as though all of my objectivity simply just deserted me.
This tape was a story of Medjugorje?
Yes, and I began immediately to believe in this. I don't know why. I, to this day, do not know why. As you know, any good journalist doesn't believe anything he can't touch or see or have a whole ream of fact behind it. And then the strangest of things happened to me. I guess you would call it my own personal phenomena of Medjugorje. I watched on the film as these 6 young people fell to their knees in this point of ecstasy when Mary is reported to appear to them. And when this took place in the film, suddenly I felt a message within me. Now, there was no audible voice. It was simply as though someone had spoken to me, and the message that they had given me was there. And I knew it was from Mary. That's what really not only shocked me from the standpoint of receiving something, but it physically affected me. She said, you are my son, and you are to do my son's will. Write about Medjugorje, and this will become your life's mission if you choose to accept it. Well, to say that I was completely taken back would be an understatement. It was as though that whole room just sort of zeroed in on me and what was happening. And I did manage to glance at my wife. She hadn't moved, so I knew that she hadn't heard anything. And I sat there really in a physical state of shock, you know, thinking, this is not possible. If someone had brought this to me, I would never believe it. Afterwards, I tried to explain it to my wife, and she looked at me as I would probably have looked at her, very skeptical, and she says, I think you need to take 2 aspirins and go to bed. You're overreacting to the whole thing. Well, thank God I never took the 2 aspirins, and I never really recovered.
Heather, perhaps you'd like to tell us the experience that you had when you first went to Medjugorje.
Well, as I said, 2 hours after I arrived in Medjugorje to do my report, I had a very personal experience myself of these signs and supernatural happenings, something that I would not have believed from anybody else. Nobody, no matter how close anybody had been to me, I would not have believed this from anybody else. It was something I had not expected to happen. But
how long had you been there when this happened? Were you with your husband?
No, I wasn't. I went out there to do the report, and as I said, 2 hours after I arrived at the church of St. James in Medjugorje, I had this experience. Inside those 2 hours, I had tried to make contact to meet the visionaries. I've been told that I could do that the next day. But 2 hours later, I had a very strange experience, and it was simply that I was standing at the side wall of the Church of St. James. There were services going on. I wasn't sure what was happening afterwards. I heard it was the Rosary and the Litany of Our Lady, but to me it didn't mean much at the time. This was 3 years ago. But I was standing there and I had my eyes closed, leaning against the wall of the church. The sun was beaming down on us at that side of the church, and I was attracted by the sound of Italian children who'd come in a coach. They'd been playing around, but they suddenly began to shout, and their cries were very, very urgent. And I looked around to see what had disturbed them, and they were pointing up into the sky. And I looked up to see what they were looking at, and you know the way you look up into the sun, you automatically raise your hand to shield your eyes. And I discovered at that point that I didn't have to shield my eyes, and that what I was looking at was in fact the sun spinning around like a great top, is the only way I can describe it, in the sky. There were colours coming from behind it, as if somebody was behind it throwing out colours, and these were swirling around it independently.
What time of the day are we talking about?
This was approximately 6 o'clock in the evening, and at that time the sun is very strong in Medjugorje. I have not been able since then to look at the sun at that time of the evening and to look straight at it.
Question there, either Father may know the answer or Heather. Is that about the time of the day that the vision normally happen? Is there a fixed time to these visions, or do they happen any time?
It's about 6:15 in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
So it is quite possible that what Heather was saying...
Well, actually, there is a coincidence in time very often between that kind of phenomena that Heather is so accurately describing and the apparition indoors.
But in fact, I didn't know that. It was the following day that somebody said to me, your experience coincided with the time of the apparition. No, I didn't. No, I didn't at all. Right. But as I said, I saw this continued to spin. There were people beside me, and a crowd of 30 or 40 people gathered. The other people were in the church at the services. But they gathered, and later on I interviewed them, but they were all pointing and looking up. Now, there are people of many nationalities, but it was quite obvious that people were seeing the same thing. And as I said, the sun continued to spin and the colours continued to come around it. At one stage, the centre of the sun turned to black, and then it turned to red later on, and then it continued to spin all the time. And then at that stage, I saw something which I believe nobody else saw, although other people had individual experiences as well. But up above the sun, to the right, in the sky just above it, I saw what appeared to be letters, and then it was as if a cloud just passed away, and I saw the word peace written in English, P-E-A-C-E, but in what I would describe as Celtic script. And this, I mean, obviously was a very amazing thing to see. And I mean, I looked around me and I asked people, do you see this? And strangely enough, there were people who said they saw a cross through the sun. And various things. And then actually something else occurred. While the sun continued to spin, I saw what looked like a fountain of light coming out of it. And where the fountain reached the top, it separated, as in a water fountain. And I saw a shining white figure with arms held out that I immediately recognized. To me, it was the risen Christ, just as the children had said they recognized the person they saw as the Virgin Mary. And I was pulling at people beside me and saying, you know, there were people saying to me, can you see the host coming up out of the sun? And that didn't mean anything to me. And I was saying, no, but can you see the figure? And it was afterwards when I returned, somebody said to me, well, that's the difference between your religion and the Catholic religion. They saw the host, you saw the body. And to me, later on, that was something that was very profound in my own spiritual life.
The next day, the message was just as strong, and almost out of desperation, I says, Terry, what am I to do with this? And she says, go write about it and get it out of your system and be done with it. So I went into the office to write about it, and absolutely nothing would come out, and it was as though there was another message there, and it said, you need to go pray more and go study more. It took me 3 weeks. I had the worst case of writer's block I'd ever experienced. I just could not put it on paper. I did pray. I prayed like I'd never prayed in my life. I prayed on my knees, and that's something most Lutherans just do not do. I finally sat down, and when I began finally to write about it, it just poured out.
But at some stage, did you not ask yourself, frankly, whether you were just in a sort of a hysterical state of excitement with everybody else who was there, that you were expecting something to happen and you were always making something happen?
Yeah. Well, I'm not the sort of person who's given to that sort of thing. I have not, in fact, had any time for these Marian apparitions before. I mean, I had investigated them for an article I'd written, but I must say that I didn't really believe that these sort of things occurred. I'm also not an hysterical sort of person. In fact, when I came back with my report to the newspaper, the national newspaper I worked for, they they prefaced my article by saying that I had never been known to exaggerate, and they accepted my account. But obviously I did sort of think, is the sun getting to me? What's happening? Am I really seeing this? And I closed my eyes several times, and this went on for almost 40 minutes.
What happened to you then after your first visit?
Well, when I went to Medjugorje, and I went, of course, having received this message and having written these articles, and I would say completely convinced of the reality of this at that time. I got there and I was so struck spiritually when I went there that I frankly forgot to eat. I slept very little. I just couldn't get enough. And the worst part was having to come back home to me. I lost 13 pounds that first visit that I went there, and I came home in a probably a very emotional state.
Did you go on your own?
Yes, I did. I went with a group, not with my wife, is what I mean by going on my own. And came back and had difficulty even talking to my wife about it. I'd break into tears, and I was not one to cry. Prior to this, as I said, I didn't consider myself highly emotional at that time, prior to this, but I had great difficulty in talking about it for a long time until I finally was able to digest most of what had happened and to start putting it really together in my life. It was from that point that I began to locally to give talks to the local civic clubs and a few of the churches and things like that, having really no idea of making a career out of doing something like that. And then that snowballed as it would outside of the town, then into the cities, and then further into other states as well. And of course now it's on an international basis. Meantime, the articles that I had written, the requests just continued to pour in. We had over 1,000, and I was beside myself. 1,000 requests for an article to me was far greater than anything I'd ever had. Finally printed them up in a small tabloid so I could pass them out when I gave talks within the Myrtle Beach or within the state of South Carolina, really not expanding this any further than that, with no plans to expand it. And yet they just kept coming, and the requests kept coming, and I printed up 2,500 to begin with.
How long ago are we talking about now, Wayne?
Believe it or not, this was only September of 1986, and as you quoted a while ago, we have 11 million that have gone out right now. Now, as a secular writer, you know, I'd be jumping through hoops to have 11 million of anything published.
It's one of the world's bestsellers, doesn't it?
It is by far, I would say it is, and it's had a tremendous effect on people. If they read it, and I get the letters I receive are unbelievable. I receive 400 or 500 letters a week now, and of course I'm speaking all over the world.
So is this now what you would call your life?
It is most definitely. This is what I do. I travel constantly. It's very difficult. Being in airplanes constantly, being in this city or that city, frankly, forgetting where I was the last week. It's
What's the
so
point
hectic.
of it? I mean, what are you trying to achieve?
I think my basis right now for doing this, again, is at the urging that this would be my life's mission, and I want to get the message to as many people as I can possibly get it to. I want, for one thing, for them to take a look at someone who, quote, had it all, and who no longer has it all, who has a great deal more happiness and peace in his life because of this, because I have found God. I have found Jesus. I have really developed that cliche phrase that is used so often, that personal relationship with Jesus. That's exactly what I found at Medjugorje.
Why would you change your life, or what made you change your life just because of a couple of hours in Medjugorje?
Well, because, okay, my first experience, my initial experience was very dramatic, and I suppose it brought me face to face. I remember thinking, I'm standing in the presence of God, and I suddenly realized at one stage that there were tears pouring down my face.
Gay Russell, between flying around the world as an executive jet pilot, was experiencing problems in both her personal and religious life. But even in the heart of Africa, she'd heard about the apparitions in Medjugorje. Further inquiries from her local clergy brought no help or interest. But an article in an English Catholic newspaper kept the flame of interest alive. She has since become a fervent apostle of the Medjugorje message, and we asked her to tell us how it began to play such a significant part in her life.
January or February of 1984, that I came home from a flight one day. It was a Friday, I always remember, and I had received a Catholic Herald, and I opened it up, and there was an article in it that said in bold letters, "Fast, pray, and turn to God, Our Lady requests." And I read the article, and it was about Medjugorje, and I was very moved by it.
At this point, she was relying almost entirely on reading the
Then
Catholic newspapers she had
read
received
a
and on
small
correspondence and
advertisement
photos
about
from her
Peter
friends in
Coffee, and I
Europe
wrote
to keep her
Dear
interest
Peter.
alive.
And so from then on, it was those people who wrote to me, and I had this deep belief that Medjugorje was definite and that I had to do something about it.
Not having been to Medjugorje yet, we asked Gay Russell what kept her going, despite the absence of any encouragement locally.
I think my straight answer to that would almost be only God knows. I think I had absolutely everything against me to maintain that interest. I felt totally convinced right from the beginning. I absolutely knew that Our Lady was appearing to those children, and I had this desperate feeling that I had to tell other people. I had to share it with others. And so, of course, the first thing I did was to go to the priest, the local parish priest, whom I respected so much and whom I had been to for spiritual direction. But I went to him and I told him about Medjugorje, and he said to me straight away, Gay, have nothing to do with this, nothing to do with apparitions. And that obviously upset me. I went to some of the sisters at the convent. I went to Mass on Sunday and I tried to tell the people there. I started to ask people, had any of them heard about it? I can only tell you that for a full 2 years, I had no support from anybody at all. Halfway through those 2 years, I suddenly wondered if it was necessary to go to Medjugorje. In the beginning, I was desperate to get there. I asked my husband, he said no, he wanted me to have nothing to do with it. And then after about a year, I suddenly thought of the 6 million people here who would never get there. And I thought, well, surely it's not just for people who go there. And I became terribly convinced that it wasn't necessary to go there. I've always led a very dramatic life. I've always had a very exciting life, and I've often been the first to do all sorts of things, especially with my flying. And so I thought, no, it's not necessary to go. And I found that just by living the messages as best I could here at home, my life started to change tremendously. My marriage became very deep and meaningful. I started to receive tremendous joy in my heart. And I started also to receive the gift of peace. I had this tremendous peace within me.
One of the other great shrines of Our Lady venerated in the Catholic Church is at Knock on the west coast of Ireland, where Our Lady is said to have appeared over 100 years ago. It was there that we spoke to Sister Briege McKenna, a well-known preacher and author, with a healing gift both spiritual and physical. She was herself at the age of 24 subject to what she would call a miraculous cure. Having been crippled by arthritis for many years and in extreme pain, she was attending a prayer meeting in Orlando when, as she says, the Lord touched me, and she was healed. Father Michael O'Carroll was her spiritual director during her training to become a nun, and she has remained in touch with him ever since.
Well, when I was a novice, which is 20-something years ago, he was the spiritual director for my first superior general, who was an old lady, and I was looking after her. And he used to come, I mean, he seemed old then, that was years ago, but then I was much younger. And then I never met him again until about, I think 3 years ago. I met him because of my involvement with Medjugorje and his interest in Medjugorje. So I went to meet him and found him very refreshing.
He's a great man. I know him very little, but he's so refreshing every time I meet him. He doesn't take himself too seriously.
That's right.
He has a high regard for you, but on this occasion he's dropped me right in it because he was supposed to be standing where I'm standing, interviewing you, but he had another spiritual commitment. So A, he apologizes, and B, I'm in the soup instead of him.
Right.
So just to prove these miracles do happen, what we thought we'd do is talk a little bit about Medjugorje, which he wants you to do. And as it's getting a bit cool in Knock, we thought we might go on inside and do that.
Sure,
So if we walk on down here, we can continue that inside.
I asked her to tell us how she knew about Medjugorje even before it happened.
Yes, in May of '81, I was in Rome at a meeting and I met Father Tomislav Vlasic, and at that time I didn't know who he was, but he knew me. And he and a group of Yugoslavian priests asked me to pray with them. And at that time, he was spiritual director in Mostar for young people. And he was troubled because, you know, of the problems with youth, and especially at the time with the government. And in praying with him, I got an image, which I try to describe to people as like God uses the imagination. And I saw this church with 2 white steeples, and he was sitting inside the church, and from the table, the altar behind, there were streams of water flowing all around his chair and out into the body of the church. And I saw people drinking, like as if they were cupping it and drinking, and they would go out and bring others in. And I said to him, I don't know what it means, but one day you'll understand. And a priest came up whom I knew and had worked with in Latin America, a Sacred Heart father, provincial of Sacred Hearts of Quebec, Canada. And he said to him, Our Lady's going to visit you. But you know, it didn't mean anything to me, and it didn't mean that much to, it was just a nice thought. Sunday I went down to give my talk Sunday morning. I got up about 5 o'clock Sunday morning, and I was in, you know, to pray. And there was an icon in the little oratory. And Medjugorje was the furthest thing from my mind. I was thinking of what I was going to be teaching that day, asking the Lord to help me. When very clearly, now it was a voice, but I suppose a voice people think, did you hear it out? It was just like a very strong sense of it, like an idea, said, Bridge, from the icon, as I'm saying the rosary, Bridge, you must go to Medjugorje, and you will go on the Feast of Corpus Christi. So I went to Medjugorje. That was my first visit. And I wanted to go, you know, I didn't want anybody to know. I was going there for my own, you know, holiness and to seek from Our Blessed Lady. And I did have a marvellous experience the first, when I walked in the day before Corpus Christi. As I was sitting in, you know how crowded you've been there, the churches, I was sitting in the front of the church at the Eucharist, and Father Tomislav Pervan got up to speak. And as he was speaking, I started to cry. This terrible sadness came over me. And the girlfriend with me turned to me and she said, Breach, do you know what he's saying? And as I said no to her at the back of the altar, just, it was as if I could no longer see him, but I could see like a large TV screen. And for the next, during the 40 minutes while he spoke, I had this image of a mountain, like a volcanic eruption, and this black, thick lava pouring out of it. And I was in the middle of all these priests and bishops, and they were all walking towards it. And it was like I was in it, and yet I was sitting there. And I was saying to them, you don't need to worry. Don't be afraid. And I had this desperation inside me to try and tell them that the power of ordination, that they were given the authority to drive it back and to stop it from coming. And it was like trying to get something across to somebody who can't understand. And as I walked with them, I was very conscious, I'm so because of my work, I was very conscious that there were some who were going very rapidly towards it, while others were standing looking at it as it was this lava, I call it, to give it a name, you know, like it was black, thick smoke. And I kept saying, please don't go, please don't let yourself go into it. And just at that moment, as I saw the thick lava, they became the same colour, many of them ran away. And he stopped. So that ended it. And I went over to the rectory afterwards and I met Father Tomislav, and I said to him, I was very curious, because I often get, you know, when I pray with people, I often get insights, because I believe that I don't have to know anything about a person, that the risen Christ is right here. And if people open themselves to be ministered to, then Christ can reveal himself. I don't need to know anything. But I said to Father Tomislav, I'd love to know what you were speaking about. He said, Breach, my talk was on the power of the priesthood. But then the other experience I had when I was there the second time was that when I was in the room, during the apparitions, I had a terrible, I thought I was going to die. This was my moment. I got a terrible pain in my, just above my breast, just a terrible, sharp pain that brought tears to my eyes. And I thought, well, I'm not sick. I have a good, strong heart. I got a physical. And just as it was the most terrible pain I'd ever experienced, and just as I was going through it, I heard, as the visionaries dropped, this voice said, Breach, this is just to help you to understand the pain I have for my sons and how much I want you to help them.
I heard a priest at Medjugorje, a Franciscan, from the altar say that he thought the Blessed Virgin Mary, in his terms, was more important than ecumenism, and he had a feeling that ecumenism had been put on the top of the pyramid, as he said it, and his feeling was that the Blessed Virgin Mary should be on top of that pyramid. How do you react to that?
Well, I'm not in the business of constructing pyramids at all, to be quite honest with you, Paddy, and I wouldn't put it just that way. I think that the only one on top of the pyramid for all of us is Jesus Christ. And those of us who are helped towards Jesus Christ by the Blessed Virgin Mary, as all three of us here quite obviously now are, I think have a very great regard for her. But the ecumenical problem has been better understood through advertence to the Orthodox Christians, who have very strong Marian traditions, of course, as we know.
Heather, have you ever thought of becoming a Catholic?
I have thought about it. I considered it. I wondered, is that what God wants? But in fact, one of the things that struck me very strongly about Medjugorje is that God is calling to all people, all Christians. One of the messages the Virgin gave to the visionaries there is that all roads lead to God. And that men have made the divisions, and this is something that struck me. I think what is more important is that you return to God and you have a certain relationship with God than that perhaps that you attend any particular church.
So the point we were discussing with Father Michael just now about ecumenism and the Blessed Virgin Mary being able to go together, do you think they can?
I do indeed, because I think that it's a gradual moving towards, the churches are moving towards each other. I mean, something I would not have been able to accept a few years ago, but which I do now, is that the Virgin in Medjugorje says she is simply the messenger there to lead people towards God. Now, God used her as his messenger before. I can now accept that he can do so again. I would not have been able to do that 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, I would hope that ecumenism, as far as Mary is concerned, would continue, that the non-Catholic faiths would be able to embrace her for what she really is, and that is a messenger from God and also the absolute perfect example of what we are to be. As far as Medjugorje goes, though, I do not see it as an ecumenical movement at all. Now, that may sound strange, and I disagree with you on this, Heather, only slightly. Let me put it this way. I don't see Lutherans and Church of Ireland and the Anglicans and the Catholics coming together in an ecumenical sense from what is happening at Medjugorje. I see the people of these faiths coming together as the children of God as one, with no walls between them. One thing Mary has emphasized at Medjugorje when she speaks about this being a message for all faiths is, and I love the way she put it herself, my son and I do not cut the cake where faiths are concerned. We do not divide it into pieces. We do not put walls between you. You do that.
Is this one of the messages you're quoting?
That is one of the messages, one of the actual messages. And she went on to describe a woman in the village who was extremely devout and actually, as she put it, near sainthood. And the children looked at her very shocked and very surprised, and they said, "Blessed Mother, the woman you are describing," because she called her by name, she says, "she is a Muslim." And Mary looked at them and she said, "Yes, I know, but that's for God to decide." Do you realize what would happen if we all accepted that and said, "Let me take care of this one soul"? There's where this individual peace comes in. So I don't see it as Lutherans and Catholics finally finding a common ground to come together to coexist. I see it as all of us coming together as the children of God and existing as one, not as separate individual religions.
When you're telling me things like that, it's preempting an awful lot of questions, so let me come to one of them right now.
Sorry.
You, not at all, you are quoting the messages as though there is no doubt in your mind that A, the messages come, B, that the children write down exactly what Our Lady says, and for you all that makes sense and you have no question in your mind about it?
Absolutely none. I find nothing coming out of the messages at Medjugorje, the individual messages that Mary is giving, or the overall message of conversion. I find nothing really contrary to the doctrine of really any Christian faith. Now, I've been challenged on that. I've been challenged on that by Lutheran pastors of my own church. And maybe the challenge comes from the fact that purgatory is mentioned or the rosary is mentioned, and they see that as maybe against their church doctrine. But what I'm saying as far as the scriptures are concerned, and as far as the Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed are concerned, there's nothing coming from Medjugorje outside of Holy Scripture.
How would you react to somebody saying you sound a bit gullible, Mr. Weibel?
Well, after 20 years as a journalist and after, 10 years of owning my own publications, I would say that the last thing I am is gullible.
Father Michael Carroll, in addition to writing many books on the subject, went to Medjugorje for the first time in 1983 and has remained a staunch but questioning enthusiast ever since. We spoke to him in his garden in Dublin and asked him about the attitude of both the Church and the Pope to the apparitions. Father Michael.
It is currently believed, and I think I can say this with all the reservation that is necessary and respecting his authority, that he accepts the authenticity of the apparitions. He does not wish to intervene because there is a general principle that in the government of dioceses or in the government of countries subject to a national episcopal conference, the Pope allows people to exercise their own authority. There are various indications that he does view Medjugorje favorably. He sent blessings, one of which I have seen in his writing, to the children, to the witnesses, which is rather exceptional, let's face it. And he has encouraged people to go there and received recently Brazilian bishops and priests who were on their way to Medjugorje. He has asked people to pray that the matter will be properly and correctly, and I should think favorably resolved. I would say broadly that the present Pope is favorable but does not wish to intervene.
Where do you think the Pope stands on all this?
Unofficially, the Pope has indicated by comments that he's made that he is very favorable toward Medjugorje, and I think that could be backed up also by the very fact that it's been going on now for 7 years. And in that 7 years, and the Catholic Church is extremely cautious, and they ought to be. They ought to be. And the rest of the world, the rest of the Protestant faiths are going to look at whatever they do. And they're going to base their own feeling, I think, on what the Catholic Church does. They have been long in investigating this thing already. They have been very, very cautious in their approach to it. But by the same token, if something like this takes place and something comes up within that that's outside of church doctrine, it's immediately censored. Now, Medjugorje has gone on for 7 years. It's not been censored. I think that basically gives an overall approval as to what's happening. The official position of the Catholic Church is now is that the faithful may freely go, but they go as individuals and they reserve their final judgment until the Church has ruled on it. I find that to be, a very civilized way of approaching this thing.
On the question of bishops, I gather that the local bishop has not been, let's say, entirely on the side of these appearances at Medjugorje.
The local bishop has been very opposed, and he has issued a number of statements. The two most remarkable, probably, are the memorandum which he circulated to the world's press in 1984, and the statement which he made on the 25th of July last year, 1987, which is the patronal feast of St. James, that is, of the parish of Medjugorje, and it was on the occasion of a confirmation ceremony. He was forthright and explicit in rejecting the authenticity of the apparitions. And he has been equally so in the memorandum, lengthy memorandum, which he circulated in 1984. In April of last year, 1987, the whole matter was taken out of his hands and he was asked to dissolve the commissions. So after some time, after a reasonable delay, the authorities in Rome decided that they would transfer the question of a decision on the authenticity or otherwise of the apparitions to the entire Episcopal Conference of the country of Yugoslavia. That's where the matter rests at the present time. So that in a certain sense, the statement which the bishop made in July last year is ultra vires. I don't like to say he had no right to make this statement. I don't like to speak that way about a bishop, but the fact is that it has no particularly binding character.
How then do you explain that inside the church you have bishops who don't believe it? You're sitting here saying you happily believe everything. We have the Bishop of Mostar, where Medjugorje is in his diocese, and he believes nothing. How do you equate these things as a journalist?
As a journalist, and I never lost that desire and need to go back and do research and to study something, which I have done. I've gone back and studied Marian apparitions as far back as I could locate them. And I've looked very deeply into the question of the local bishop of Mostar who opposes this. I find at the basis of the opposition a local squabble between a secular set of priests and the Franciscan priests there. And I find this is really his basis of opposition. I also have discovered in looking at what's taken place in this investigation of Medjugorje that twice he was given the authority to set up commissions to investigate the apparitions. The very first time it was so poorly done, the Vatican threw it out and said, go back and do it again. He went back and he did it again, and he loaded the panel, so to speak, and the vote came out very negative against Medjugorje. The Vatican again took a look at it and said, this is not right. They could see the bias in it.
So what about the Bishop of Mostar, who thinks that this is the work of the devil?
Well, wasn't it St. Vincent Ferrier who supported the wrong pope and sat up in his casket after he died and said, I made a mistake? I mean, you know, you can be a good person and still be, you know, misunderstand what's going on. I really believe that, to me, you know, even the bishop, and I you know, don't know, you know, what to say about him. I haven't read all about what his background and everything. But I think I admire the people in Medjugorje because they never criticise him. They always pray for him. I think the important thing, again, is that it's a test for them. And, you know, this passage where Jesus said, which was read at the Eucharist a few days ago, a good tree does not bear bad fruit, and a bad tree does not bear good fruit. And you will know the tree by its fruit. By their fruit you shall know them. Well, 7 years, in the 7 years of the millions of people I've met in every corner of the world, I have never met anybody who's been to Medjugorje who left the Catholic Church but who actually joined it and came to the Eucharist. I have met more people who are out of the church, who came back to the sacraments, people who would be completely opposed to Catholicism. I had an experience while I was there of a young Presbyterian man in Scotland who was very opposed to the Catholic Church. And on Corpus Christi, when I prayed with him and got a word for him, he wrote me a letter later on saying that at the Eucharist he knew he had to become a Catholic. So, you know, everything I believe is a Catholic, and I'm totally convinced of my faith. And this is why I say that, to me, by their fruit you shall know them. If people were leaving the church or they were doing, you know, all kinds of strange things, but here they're all going to Medjugorje. We can't get them to stay in church for an hour. They go to Medjugorje and stay for 3 hours. Young people in the thousands.
How do you react to the fact that I believe the bishop, in one of his more pungent statements, said he recognised all this as the work of the devil, and that the devil was definitely working in Medjugorje?
I think if this is the work of the devil, it's probably the biggest mistake he's made in eternity. I cannot imagine 12 million people, which is the number that's now given, that have gone to Medjugorje, who have come back and converted their lives to Jesus Christ, not into a love and a devotion and making Mary into a goddess, but into a love of Jesus. I cannot imagine that kind of work coming from something evil.
So I don't need to ask you, Sister Breeze, whether you believe in the devil.
I believe very much in the devil. I try not to give much glory, but I have had encounters, you can imagine, this kind of work.
Well, that's what I wondered. Tell us some of the things the devil's been doing to you.
Well, I wouldn't go into it personally because I wouldn't give him glory, but I'd just say that I've had, just give you one incident that happened, but thanks be to the Lord, he was is more powerful. I was going in a particular country to have a meeting with some leaders, and a priest was driving me. Now the priest, I just finished a priest retreat, and the priest did not know that I was going to meet the leader of this country, who people would never believe that I was, and I had been told, you know, that I would see him, and the leader of the country sent for me. And I was afraid to say him to the priest because I thought, you know, if they knew, and yet I felt the Lord saying, I want you to meet him because I want to speak to him through you. And the priest was driving me with my interpreter, and we were coming on a road, you know, it wasn't a very busy road, and yet that particular time, I had to be there at 7 o'clock. We told him at a certain place. He didn't have any reason to know why, but as he was driving, he was going about 70 or 80 miles an hour. and he was behind a truck, and he came out. But if he did, there was a big truck coming right, speeding, and the two trucks just came, one beside the other. And all I remember, the priest putting his two hands, he lifted his hands off the wheel because there was nowhere to go. If he had tried to avoid him, we would have gone down over an embankment into a deep, deep, deep pit down. And he put his hand, he said, "Oh, Jesus Christ." And at that moment, all I remember was the car filling up with evil, and I started really screaming at the Lord, "Please protect us." And the priest, afterwards, all he remembered was something lifting the car. When he looked, the road was clear, and he turned around and he said, "Oh my God," he said, "what happened?" But now, as a result of that meeting, there was something very powerful happened to that man that I met. And I felt that night the Lord saying to me, you know, that there were forces going to try and prevent it. And I've had incidents like that and many others that I don't talk about.
Secrets and signs, these seem to us like the journalistic come on. This is to keep us on the edge of our seats. How do you react to the stories of secrets and signs?
I think they're very, very important, but by the same token, getting right back to the Catholic Church again, I have found the greatest resistance to this within the Catholic Church, not outside of the church. And I find many priests who poo-poo all of that, and they say, well, this is some more of this apocalyptic doomsday type of thing. I don't see it as that. I see it as events that are going to happen in the world, and if you go back to the New and the Old Testament, it's there.
But why can't we know the secrets now? What's the point of them being
Well, I think if we knew the
secret?
secrets now, we'd still pay very little attention to them. In fact, we would probably then begin to investigate and to study them to death as we do everything, and then we would find ways to disprove that they were ever going to happen.
And this whole question of secrets, I believe there are 9 or 10. Some of the visionaries have had 10 secrets. These secrets seem to be foretelling a bit of doom and gloom as well, and yet we're told that 3 of them, the doom and gloom has already been averted by people repenting, praying, or whatever. Now, this is a little bit having your cake and eating it, because how do we know that anything was going to happen, and how do we know that we were good enough to avert it happening? And down here on Earth, we need sort of proof of some of these things if they're going to have some meaning. Some of us do anyway.
Well, you know, no, I can't answer for others, but for me, I don't go into a lot of, like, I take the message of Medjugorje, the call, the 5 points that she has, and I think that if you begin to look for, you know, signs, like people who go to Medjugorje looking for signs and something to happen extraordinary, miss the whole point of what Medjugorje is really calling us to.
But then one would say, why does Our Lady make the sun spin if this is a distraction? And do you believe that it does spin and people do see it, or do you not believe it?
An awful lot of people. The last time I was in Medjugorje, the priest had to get up and give a talk and tell people not to be imprudent. I had 2 people in Florida phone me. One, a young accountant who was going blind, another who's lost their sight. Because of imprudence, they went to Medjugorje and looked at the blazing sun without any coverage and burnt the retinas in their eyes. And when they talked to me, I said to them, you know, that is what the very thing that the priests in Medjugorje are trying to tell people, that, you know, I saw the sun spinning. I wasn't even looking. I was up the hill saying my rosary.
And you looked at it and it didn't affect your eyes?
Yes, I was up I was saying the rosary at 8:30 in the morning with Father Kevin and his sister-in-law, a group of us, and we were sitting saying the rosary, and this Croatian man started screaming, "Look!" And what we saw was the sun coming at us, and it spinning like a wheel, and then we saw the crucifix disappear. No, I wasn't looking for it.
How important are these miracles and sun spinnings, and have you had any experiences yourself?
Well, let me begin by telling you, yes, I've had many of the phenomenal experiences of Medjugorje. The sun is probably the most commonly known.
Tell us what happens.
I've seen the sun. It seems as though a huge disk overlays on the sun, and that it spins. It has the appearance of spinning on the outer edges, and these beautiful colors come out of it. I've heard it scientifically explained as well, which doesn't surprise me, because I would assume that God would use science, since He is the one who gave it to us to begin with. I've seen the cross on the mountain completely disappear. The very fact of staring into the sun, by the way, is a phenomena in itself, that you could sit there and stare into the sun for 15 or 20 minutes. I've seen many, many things there, and like Father is pointing out, they are to be treated with great respect, but by the same token, they are merely signs.
I gather we're getting towards the end of what's called in the Catholic Church a Marian year, and I think that ends in August. There is some feeling, I gather, that a special sign might easily occur at the end of the Marian year, i.e. the Blessed Virgin will mark either the Medjugorjean spot or the whole sequence of appearances. Do you think this is likely to happen? Does it matter to you whether it does or doesn't happen? And what do you think the effect would be if we get this, quotes, sign?
I definitely think the sign will happen, to start with. The sign is...
So you're not going to be too worried about egg on your face in September when there hasn't been a sign?
No, I've never doubted. I've never doubted. The sign will be a permanent structure that I think will tell the whole world. But of course, there will still be doubters. I think if Christ came before us and walked in front of us, that many of us would still doubt.
I think there are some people who feel that we're all waiting for the Holocaust or the Big Bang or Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, what's your own feeling about the sort of sign that may be left?
I would say that the fact that we're going to get a sign, the fact that Our Lady is taking an interest, is itself a basis for optimism and for hope, and that we should take an optimistic view. If there is difficulty ahead, after all, it doesn't need an apparition from heaven to tell us that. It's pretty evident in our television screens every day of the week that one way or another there are possibilities, there's at any rate a danger of serious upset in the world in one way or another. I think the hopeful thing about Medjugorje and such other apparitions of Our Lady as are recorded is that there's someone on our side who's taking an interest in us, and we're not going to be abandoned, and I'm all for it.
Father Jozo was the parish priest of Medjugorje at the time of the first apparitions. He has since been jailed by the authorities for his steadfast defense of the children and their story, and his hearing was permanently impaired by the treatment he received whilst in prison. He is often referred to as the first martyr of Medjugorje because of the many burdens and sufferings he's endured on behalf of the visionaries. From initial caution, doubt, and even disbelief, he has now become a firm believer in the visions and a great champion of the visionaries. Father Jozo might well be called one of the first martyrs of Medjugorje. Perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit more about him.
Well, at that time, the authorities were rather nervy, and they thought this is another manifestation of Croatian nationalism. And Croatian nationalism has pretty turbulent and at times violent history, even recent history. So they dread anything like an upsurge of Croatian nationalism. And when they saw a public demonstration and people gathering, crowds and all that, they thought, this is it again. So they took these rather stringent measures, and he was the one who paid the price. He was put into jail. He has suffered permanent ear damage because of the noise in a furniture factory where he was put to work. But as a result of world protests, and some came from very high authorities, government authorities in Italy, I understand, he was released after a year and a half. And he has recovered, but I don't think he will ever fully recover his hearing.
I believe it's even got as far as Gorbachev and Reagan. Is that right? That they're getting involved too?
There is a very strong rumour, and there are grounds for the rumour, that there has been contact between one of the visionaries in Maria, in Medjugorje, and let's put it, the White House and the Kremlin. Now, the response has come from the White House indirectly through the American ambassador to the United Nations. I've seen a photocopy of his letter, which he acknowledged the fact that there had been communication and was acknowledging the prayers that had been offered with gratitude. And significantly, the treaty limiting arms was signed on the feast of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the 8th of December, 1987.
Another miracle.
Well, let's hope so.
Just to
First of
sum
many.
up, Father, would you think we've got here what we would call another Lourdes Plus on our hands?
Oh, I should think so. I've been very heartened by the fact that the Orthodox in Yugoslavia are showing an interest in the events, and there are so many distinctive characteristics that haven't been seen in any previous apparitions. There's the worldwide interest, which is sustained. There are the scientific tests that have been conducted. As far as I know, no visionaries have been subject to the kind of tests that, for instance, Professor Henri Joyeux of the University of Montpellier and Professor Sanguinetti of Milan have conducted on the children, as well as the enormous interest of contemporary journalists, religious journalists, and theologians, the foremost Marian theologian of the day being René Laurentin, who has been interested from the very early days and has committed himself completely to the authenticity of the apparitions.
And I assume it will be true to say that you have no doubts yourself about the appearances?
None whatsoever, but that does not mean that there may not be mistakes now and then.
Right.
That's the human condition.
René Laurentin travels the world writing and lecturing on the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin. He was caught briefly between planes in Philadelphia recently and was asked when he first got interested in Medjugorje.
It was 8 months after, 8 months after the first apparition.
He went on in his
It was
own
not
slightly
very
idiomatic
accurate,
English
but I
to
was
tell us about the
interested
extensive
in
scientific
that.
tests that he had
I have
organized
impression
in
that
conjunction with Professor Henri Joyeux of the University of Montpellier.
Oh no.
These included electroencephalographs, electrooculographs, eye reflex tests, and audio response tests, all of which took place during the so-called ecstasies of the children. The result and detailed analysis of these tests are contained in his recent book, Scientific and Medical Studies on the Apparitions of Medjugorje. The unanimous conclusion of these studies, he says, are that the visionaries are psychologically healthy with no signs of neurosis or hysteria. Their ecstasies are not a pathological phenomenon. We are not dealing with hallucination or accident. Before proceeding with these exhaustive tests, the visionaries asked the Virgin's permission for them to take place. And it was with her consent that he proceeded, and of course with the willing consent of the visionaries too. We asked him for brief details of the apparitions and the visionaries' reactions to them. They begin, he said, with a recital of several Our Fathers, Hail Marys, and Glory Bees until the Virgin appears. The first phase is contemplation or conversation. Suddenly their gaze, already fixed on the location of the apparition, becomes more intense. Thus they enter into a first phase of the ecstasy. Some, in particular Ivan and Maria, simply contemplate. Others, particularly Vitska and Ivanka, converse, sometimes together with the apparition. Their lips can be seen moving, but no voices are heard, just as it was with Bernadette at Lourdes. The second phase, prayer with the apparition. Suddenly, all their voices become audible, and they say in Croatian, "Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name," etc. The third phase is the contemplation or conversation. Their voices disappear again for a second period of contemplation or conversation. Then comes the end of the apparition, and suddenly the 5 pairs of eyes and the heads are raised. This is most noticeable in the case of Jakov, the smallest visionary. He went on to say that while some people say the secrets are all about doom and the end of the world, it's interesting to see that Ivanka, who knows all the secrets, is not only married, but has a beautiful daughter and always seems very happy. When you talk about the message, which you've done several times, what do you think the message is of Medjugorje?
Well, it's very clear. She's asking that we take a look at our world today and see the direction that it's gone, and I don't think it takes a genius to figure out that we're not exactly doing things right, especially as far as the spiritual is concerned, and to convert our lives, or to reconcile with Jesus completely, or to reconcile with God, if you will, because I think the message is just as potent for a Jew as it is for a Christian, or a Muslim, as I pointed out a while ago. Her message is one of prayer, conversion, fasting, and penance. And if you do these things, of course, then you have that relationship with Jesus.
After returning from her visit to Medjugorje, Gay Russell found that the real significance of Our Lady's message came to her more clearly when she was sharing it with the local Malawians and going to Mass with them.
But through going to these masses, I was led to a Malawian girl, Monica, and we became terribly friendly. And through her and telling her about Medjugorje, I met some other Malawians. And for several months, we were 5 or 6 of us who went together to Mass every day. And they were always asking me about Medjugorje, and I was sharing all I could. And then I said to them, perhaps we could start a prayer group together. And so on Tuesday evenings we would meet for prayer, and it was the Malawians that really taught me the meaning of prayer. I think when Our Lady asks us to pray from the heart, I think it was the Malawians who taught me through their very deep simplicity and their openness. And when I look at the response to Medjugorje now in this country, I'm so excited when I see that every main cathedral has a Medjugorje Mass once a month, a Mass for Peace, which is very well attended. And we've started putting out newsletters and sending out the messages. And it's the Malawians who have really responded very strongly. And now it's not only Malawians, now it's every community. And I would say that we're a very multiracial group, we're very mixed, but I find it very significant in this part of the world.
So what is Medjugorje doing, if anything, to your life now?
Well, as I said, it's really the day-to-day living of it. Also, I'm involved with the Medjugorje movement, if you like to call it that, in Ireland. I'm on the Dublin committee. I was elected to the National Committee, which is a coordinating council that helps to get information around the country. I've been asked to go to various places, churches and halls, Catholic churches and halls and places like that around the country to speak of my experiences. And while it's not something I enjoy doing, nor do I enjoy doing this sort of interview, I feel that something happened to me and I'm required to say it.
Fine. So you're becoming quite a powerful cell in the Medjugorje movement by the sound of it.
I don't know that. I think people hear about experiences. Some of them go because they're curious. They would like to have these experiences for themselves. And some of them go because they're searching for God and they feel that you have met God in some way and they go to see can they meet God in that way. I don't believe you need to go to Medjugorje for that, but it certainly has made a lot of people sit up and think about God.
I hope you won't think this is going over the top if I say that there are two things that you and Our Lady seem to have in common. You say in your book that you are a signpost, just showing the way to Jesus, and I believe the Virgin Mary said the same at Medjugorje.
Well, I see myself as somebody, you know, if you follow, a signpost doesn't take you to the place you're going, it just guides you. And if the signpost, if you could imagine, if you came up to a crossroads and you wanted to go, and the signpost kept changing its mind, you wouldn't be sure where to go. And I believe that for my own personal life, that I must be totally convinced. And it's your conviction and being convinced of where to send people. And I'm convinced that Jesus Christ is Lord and that He's the answer. And that for me as a Catholic sister, you will find Jesus in the church. You will find Him, as He said, as Our Lady said, at the foot at the altar. And so I see myself not as, you know, you can't make people. I mean, there are many people I would love close to me to get converted, but you can't. We don't have that power. But I think people need to be told this is the way. There aren't 10 ways. And I think when you are definite, it's like the signpost that says go that way. If you follow it, you'll get to where you're going.
If you had to end up summing up the message there, and I would like you, if you could, to take this in 3 parts. What is the message for the believers? What's the message for the non-believers? And what's the message for the people who are attacking it?
The message for the people who are attacking it, I shall take first, is be fair, live and let live, which is what we all have to do in the modern world in what we call a pluralist society. The message for the non-believer is further to treat every human being with respect, to show respect for the rights of the human person, including the rights of the visionaries to their reputation. Therefore, shocking things shouldn't be said about them. The message for the non-believer who's wavering is look into this seriously. It may be giving you a chance that you need. Sooner or later, you may need religion. Many people have found that in some of the terrible pressures of modern life, religion is the only answer. For the believer, I would say the message is twofold. First of all, to practice total conversion, the way of peace and reconciliation, which we haven't yet mentioned, Paddy, which is vital to the whole concept of Medjugorje, reconciliation and peace in every aspect and in every sector of human life, prayer and fasting as this is advisable and wise in each case, and then to be an apostle of the message and, again, with respect, to communicate it to others.
One of the quotes I hear quite a lot of is that by their fruits you shall know them, that what's happening at Medjugorje, never mind what people are saying, is proof in itself. Is that how you feel?
I think so, and I think if this is of man, that it will disintegrate, it would go away, and yet it seems to be growing instead of going away. And if it's of God, it will continue to produce good fruit, and the fruit has been excellent to this point. I think there's one voice in Scripture that I just keep calling out about Medjugorje. It's just, and I don't quote Scripture very often, but it's Matthew 11, verse 25. It shows you how much I quote Scripture. And it's Jesus speaking to God, and he says, "We praise you, Father, for you have hidden from the learned and the clever what you have revealed to the merest of children." Now maybe that's an overall coating of what's going on there, but I find that the simplicity is what really confounds many of us who are educated or who thinks we're educated, who are in these fields in the technical world. We have a hard time dealing with something as simple and direct as a miracle of God.
Father Richard Foley, who is the spiritual director of the Medjugorje Centre in London, is a Jesuit theologian who's been to Medjugorje 10 times already and writes regularly about it in the Catholic press. We asked him to give us an update on the situation in Medjugorje today. Father Richard Foley.
Yes, I'd be pleased to, Paddy. I think Medjugorje can be summed up in the phrase business as usual. Indeed, Medjugorje business, which of course is the Lord's business, is booming. The pilgrim multitudes still throng the place. The last count of priests who've been there is anything past 13,000 now, and 11 or 12 million pilgrims. You see these crowds at Mass in the evening, the various language Masses in the morning, and they, of course, all these extraordinary phenomena are focused upon the visionaries. Now, what is the situation there? Well, two of the visionaries, Mirjana and Ivanka, having received all 10 secrets God's mother is entrusting to them, no longer see her on the same regular basis. The remainder, the 4 others, that is to say Maria and Vitska and Yakov and Ivan, do still see her every evening. 3 of them are all in Medjugorje, in Biacevici. They attend the evening apparition at 6:45, held in the choir loft of the church. But Vitska, who is ill, she has her apparition at home. Now, what about the truth, the authenticity of these apparitions? Well, we are all perfectly entitled to form a private judgment about their supernaturalness. And, of course, the Church will make the final decision, and the competence for that now lies, by the Vatican special arrangement, in the power of a national commission comprising the country's bishops. This commission, as from 1987 early on, superseded the diocesan commission under the Bishop of Mostar. So, therefore, any other person's judgment is purely private. We've got a right to it. Mine's positive. Other people's, like the Bishop of Mostar's, is negative. He has a right to that opinion and judgment as well. And we're entitled to our private judgment and entitled to go there on private pilgrimage, with the proviso that we are prepared to acquiesce in and abide by whatever decision finally forthcomes from the Church. Among the pilgrims who've been there recently, 2 bishops that I've had the pleasure of meeting, the Auxiliary Bishop Fisher of Los Angeles and His Lordship Bishop McMahon of Brentwood. Both were very, very pleased and excited indeed about Medjugorje and its dynamic apostolic and pastoral potential for the Church of the future. And might I just end by saying that updating Medjugorje is that it's looking forward, of course, to the future, and its immediate future will be the post-apparition era, so to call it, and that's going to be very exciting too. We know that that miraculous sign's going to appear on the Hill of Apparitions.
Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
and I'm meeting the most wonderful people, and I feel that it's all part of Our Lady's plan to spread the message here in Malawi.
To ask a question which may seem a bit flip, but I'd like to ask it anyway. In the messages that I've read, it seems that the Blessed Virgin Mary often cries. Does she ever laugh?
Oh, yes. Oh, I think so. Oh, yes. I think this has been recorded. Well, you would expect that. God has a sense of humour, hasn't he?
Well, I hope so.
How on earth could he put up with mankind if he didn't have a sense of humour?
I hope so. On the 6th of May, 1985, Ivanka became the second visionary, Mirana was the first, to be given all 10 secrets from the Blessed Virgin. On the following day, the 7th of May, she received her last apparition, which she enjoyed alone and which lasted for 1 hour. This is part of Ivanka's description of her vision on that day. First, she said, Our Lady asked me what I would like. I answered I would like to see my mother again. Her mother had died in April 1981, 2 months before the first apparition. Ivanka continued, Our Lady smiled and gave the sign of yes, and suddenly my mother appeared. She was smiling. Our Lady told me to get up, so I obeyed her. My mother held me, and then she disappeared. Our Lady then said to me, My dear child, today is our last meeting. Do not be sad, because I will come again each year on the anniversary of the apparitions. And Our Lady continued, Dear child, do not think you have done anything wrong, or that such a thing is the reason I will no longer come to see you. No, nothing like that. You have accepted with all your heart the plans of my Son, and you have answered him in everything. Few persons on this earth have known this great grace that you and your brothers and sisters have received. Be happy, because I am your mother who loves you, Ivanka. Thank you for your answer to the call of my Son. Thank you for your perseverance. Thank you for having stayed with him as long as he asked you to. Dear child, say to all of your friends that my son and myself, we're always near them when they call us. I then asked Our Lady if I could embrace her. She nodded, and I kissed her. I asked her to bless me. She blessed me and smiling said, Go in the peace of God. She left slowly, accompanied by her 2 angels. Our Lady was very happy, very joyful. When asked by a friend how she felt now that her apparitions had ended, lonely, Ivanka replied, even lonelier than when my mother died. And so the living story of the miracles and the message of Medjugorje continues. It seems that God alone knows how and when it will end.